Thumbs up, everybody can hear me? Cool, cool. My name is June Saba. I'm an A&R over at Vydia. Today we're here to discuss the growth opportunities in the Afrobeats market. We have a Batshon, Fotemah, Ajene Watson, and Deanna Johnson, all wonderful speakers. Just start off giving a quick introduction. I'll go first. As mentioned, I am June Saba. I'm a senior label and artist relations manager over at Vydia. Currently working with a bunch of the top Afrobeat acts. We currently house Maven Records, which is a home to Rema, Ira Star, Lottie Poe, DC Talents, which is homes to Fields, Empower, which is homes to Mr. Easy, and it's a whole bunch of other names, but that's currently who Vydia is. And I'll let you go next, Abe.
Yes, sir. I'm Batshon, the founder and CEO of Beatstars. It's a music licensing marketplace where millions of music producers from all over the world upload their production across every genre, including Afrobeats. Some of our producers have been part of some pretty notable songs in the Afrobeats world, like Libyanka's People, Arya Starr's Rush, CK's Love Nwanti, Victoni and Rema's Soweto, and countless other Afrobeat songs that have been sourced on the platform. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, my name is Ajene Watson. I'm the CEO of a company, Digital Asset Monetary Network, which is the principal partner in a domain registry called DotHipHop LLC. I'm here to represent DotHipHop LLC. I'm also the managing director at DotHipHop LLC. A domain registry, if you think about .com, .biz, .club, .org, we are .hiphop. And what that means is that you have an opportunity to have a domain name that actually represents you in the culture of hip-hop and all of the derivatives of hip-hop. So that's what we're here to talk about in terms of how we can help Afrobeats in its progression in the space.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Here we go. This is the Afrobeats panel, so we're going to have a little bit more life in here. Just get used to it. There's going to be some interaction. My name is Fotemah. The head of A&R for Cinq Music. Cinq was primarily the bread and butter came from the Latin market, and I was brought in with my background from convict music to help build out the urban space and the Afrobeat space.
Hello, my name is Deanna Johnson. I am with Empire. I'm a director of marketing. I oversee rollouts, timelines, campaigns for a large bulk of our Afrobeats artists. That ranges from Fireboy DML, Olamide, Ashake, Wande Cole, Kiss Daniel, and a few others.
Okay, cool. Well, again, thank you everybody for being here.
Thank you.
And I guess, let's dive right into it. I think the first question for everybody on the panel is, how did you actually become engaged in the Afrobeat space, right? And what about that moment, solidified your love for the genre? And I can kind of go first too, I guess this is a pretty easy, question for me being Nigerian. So I guess I fell in love with the genre since I've been born. But kind of seeing it, seeing what's happened within the past couple of years with the space, has been really cool to see. But I know everybody will have a different viewpoint. So let you guys go ahead and answer that. So, when did you fall in love for Afrobeats? And what was that moment, pretty much?
I guess, okay, for me, it started really with the production music. A few years ago, there was a producer on our platform named Ransom Beats, shout out to Ransom, that has been just trailblazing the independent side of Afrobeats, and then seeing just the network effect of all of these creators from the region, not just from Nigeria, but Ghana, Botswana, all kind of places. And you could just see the influence just over the years just start to trickle. And then for me, it filled a void, just listening to Burna Boy and Wizkid and just filling a void for something that I missed in the 90s with just love music and R&B and just feel good vibes and just So yeah, I fell in love with it a few years ago and just been hooked on it since. So
It's interesting. I'm a late bloomer to Afrobeats as a genre. Yeah, I listen to a lot of Afro house, and one day I was in the gym and someone said, "Hey, put on some Afrobeats," and I thought it was Afro house, and I learned very quickly that it wasn't. And so they said, "What is that?" And they put the Afrobeats on, and that was very just so interesting.
Do you remember what song it was?
I don't remember what song it was, but it got me listening to the genre, and then I started to listen to like Wizkid and some, Two-Face, some old stuff, and
Right.
obviously Rima. But that's when I actually began to really become ingratiated with the sound because I love music.
Right.
I love music altogether, all sorts of music. So that's exactly the time that I discovered Afrobeats and just incorporating it with my day-to-day life and my work is that's what I've been doing ever since.
I think the same thing like Saba. I'm from Cameroon, so came out the stomach listening to it, I guess.
As far for me, I've always known about the culture in Afrobeats, mainly from my peers. So I've always immersed myself in the culture, so I always had an understanding. But I think the artist specifically that made me pay attention was Tiwa Savage.
Tiwa. Oh, okay. Tiwa's cold. Is there a specific song, from Tiwa?
No, she's just great in general.
Respectfully. So, okay, cool. I guess my next question is, Afrobeats has been around for a long period of time, right? But I'll say recently, within the past 10 years, we've seen the majority, of the growth, right? So, from your point of view, how has Afrobeats evolved within the past 10 years, right? And how has the transition into the digital era kind of helped that, So, yeah, I don't know if anybody wants to go first.
Yeah, I'll go first. I think even just the past 5 years, it's evolved. I think the main reason it's kind of expedited in terms of how fast it's growing is because of the digital aspect. We have these resources and these tools now to provide a platform for artists to get visibility, whether that be the videos and the Vivos and YouTubes being accessible in these markets, to the Audio Max, to the Boom Plays. I think just having the platforms now and having it easy to manage and readily accessible for these artists in these markets, I think that was primarily the reason why it's evolved so quickly, because now they have these tools.
Okay. And, how do we feel about social media kind of helping that too, right? Because we were kind of talking about this, in the back where, before, I'll say social media, we have our own personal opinions about social media, but before, the access to social media, right, the only world we seen into the continent was from what we were seeing either on TV or heard by other people. Well, now with social media, people can see, I feel like other children can see people their age, people can see people that look like them making music that they're not so familiar with, but it looks fun, it looks trendy, so I guess what are your thoughts on what social media has done, for the continent? If anybody wants to go.
Social media has done a phenomenal job for the continent. For the first time ever, you have certain African countries that are being considered touristic destinations.
Right.
For a long time, it was the Bahamas, Jamaica. Now you're hearing Ghana, Rwanda,
Senegal.
South Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal. And, all that was in my lifetime, which I'm really happy about. So, with social media, it's immediate. You can counter mainstream media with social media. You load up content within seconds. From where you are on the continent to here, I'm able to see. And that kind of transition into the music, because the music, like we said, has always been there.
Right.
But there was no means to export it over to this side where, over here, you could export it from here to there easily, but not the other way around. So now you're able to, thank God, we might have our qualms with certain streaming platforms, but still thank God for streaming, because now that music is being exposed to the world. So yeah, social media has definitely played a huge part in exporting content.
Right, for sure. And you know, I think that obviously has helped attribute to the growth. Now when we talk about growth, you know, in regards to the artists and the labels and whatnot, I kind of want to get into that. Whereas in, you know, I feel as though a lot of people on the continent feel like, you know, major labels or other companies are coming in there, and you know, they're trying to become a part of the movement, right? So how do you approach, you know, getting into the space without seeming opportunistic, right? Because right now it's seemed as a money grab, right? You go in there, it's bubbling, it's hot. So is there any, you know, what do you guys think? How do you get into the space without it seeming, you know, opportunistic?
I think for us, it just happens so naturally. You know, when we look at, you know, because we're a music tech platform and we're looking at search growth for certain keywords and terms and all the subgenres of Afrobeats, and we're looking at that over just the last 3 years alone, and we've seen like a 400% growth year over year just on search terms. And so for us, being a content platform that's available to anyone around the world, and the Beatstars ranking and algorithm being the center around the pulse of where music hits, and like we were seeing signs for the lo-fi movement 2 years before lo-fi became a thing.
Right.
We were seeing things, because what happens when you democratize the micro licensing of all of these beats and sounds from millions of creators all over the world, you start to see a collection of heat mapping. And we started noticing, you know, Afrobeats selling on the platform, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And so we're like, okay, how are we going to categorize? So we had to decide, like, how are we going to categorize this? It sounds like a fusion of pop and R&B and reggaeton and all of these different genres, but it originally came from this.
Right.
And it's like, so for the first time, and I think you know, you saw how Audio Mac did a very strategic move to go to the region and highlight independent artists out there. And Beatstars just naturally fell in it because just of the nature of heat mapping of all the sales and activity happening from the region. And so we made it a pretty big focal point, and we launched Beatstars Africa as part of just a showcase and highlight section for all the different African creators on our platform, right, and showcasing all of their, you know, subgenres and music. And so we've naturally just fell into it, and luckily we don't fall into it in a more traditional record label kind of way. Right. We work individually with individual independent creators that represent themselves, that maintain all of their rights, get paid 100% of all their revenue. So we're more of just like a technology support system in their world, right, rather than, you know.
So amplifying the creators,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you know, giving them a space to do what they do rather than,
exactly,
you know, saying, I can do this for you,
right,
come to me kind of
right
thing.
And that's kind of been our position with every country, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I like, if I can,
Yeah, for sure.
I like what both Abe and Fotemah are saying, because obviously social media did a wonderful job in bringing visibility to the continent, just as it's done a wonderful job at bringing visibility to a lot of things, right?
Right.
So yeah, we've done well there. And as Abe was saying, the way they fell into it is not opportunistic, right, per se. Right. I would look at it from the standpoint of, when I look at both of these, the gentleman's answers is, well, how does an artist actually protect themselves, right? From the opportunistic side, and from the fact that social media in and of itself isn't the end-all be-all, right, and it doesn't necessarily allow them to have full access to the data, right, full access to controlling, right, the monetization, right, of that data, and therefore we have to also say, okay, so what do we do about that? Right. And that's kind of like the tip that we're on, but you know, I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, for sure, and I'm actually glad you said that, right? Because I think, and Deanna, I'll come to you real quick, you know, because Empire is doing some really cool stuff, I think, with this as well. But you know, the tech, the data, and the infrastructure part of it, I think, is super important, right? With what's going to happen with Afrobeat within the next 5 to 10 years, right? So Vydia, we currently, again, for us, we're primarily B2B, so it's more so about providing infrastructure and tools to the independent labels and companies within the continent, so we can provide them scalability, right? They can provide distribution for their artists. They can keep everything in-house, so rather than us having to, go out there, and again, going out there is important to communicate and to connect with the people, but it's more so about not having to be there and letting them do what they do, giving them the tools so they can develop, they can garnish the artists, they can kind of do all of those things. I know Empire is, doing some really cool stuff. So, Deanna, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think for us, it was definitely organic. At Empire, we show that data. Like, we're very transparent with that information, so they're able to see it in real time because we believe in partnership. And we want to be able to have them instill their trust in us so we know how to move forward within the partnership. But to your point, we also have people on the ground. We made sure to physically go to these places, go to these markets, and experience their culture. So we're not opportunistic, but we're actually becoming educated on how to move within this space properly.
Right.
And I just wanted to add one thing, because I think what Empire has done so well, when she says having people on the ground, it's more than just people on the ground. There's an actual business entity on the ground in Nigeria, right? There's companies set up. And one of the biggest challenges that's happening for all the African creators is payments.
Right.
So you've got global payment systems like PayPal that are basically choosing who gets access to become a merchant and who doesn't. And so there's so many countries in Nigeria that don't have access to the global payment systems like PayPal. And so now there's new payment structures being developed and built in those places, but the challenge for most of the creators out there, when you solve that problem, and just onboarding payments for Nigerian creators to be able to accept payments from a global marketplace, that's going to be like the biggest problem to be solved. And when you do it in a way where it's partnering with entrepreneurs, with them as entrepreneurs, having them build their own businesses locally, it just helps impact their local economy as well too. So there's a lot of challenges, a lot of things changing over there, and we're working on a lot of that stuff too.
Right. I think we all agree that number one, the infrastructure is really, important to the growth of it, but then also the actual, connection to the culture, right? You can't want a piece of the continent without actually going there and talking to the people and seeing, what the people actually care about. So with that being said, what do you attribute to, Afrobeat success within, the U.S. market, global market in general, but within specifically the U.S. market?
Yeah.
Okay, anybody, go ahead.
If
anybody wants to go, Deanna, if you want to go. Fotemah.
I don't know what the age range is on this panel. So I'm going to take the African approach and pull rank real quick and start from the beginning, and then everybody can trickle in. My story with Afrobeats came up with before Convict, but mainly Convict. So what Convict was able to add to the space was, before that, the record that really popped was Two-Face Idiba, African Queen.
It's a record right there. It's a big
Kind of like, that's when everybody started like, okay, what's going on here in this space? After that, Akon came on the scene. Now, you had several artists that were of African descent, but they never really held up the flag, or at least that I saw them hold up the flag.
Right.
You had Sade, you had Seal, there were several, but you never really connected them. You know they were from there, but Akon was the one who came and said, here's the flag, I'm standing on it, right? And I feel like that also inspired a lot of the African creatives to say, hey, you know what? If he can do it, I can do it. Now, you're talking Akon at a time when you heard Akon, you heard Gaga. So when you take Akon, the guy who broke Gaga, and took that force and those numbers that he had, and he took that and pointed it in this direction to say, here's some artists that you should pay attention to. So he jumped on Wizkid Dondal. He jumped on P Square, Chop My Money. He got Rick Ross to jump on P Square, Beautiful Onyinye.
Of course.
So with that, from there, a lot of people started paying attention. Hey, you know what? There's a lot going on in this space. So from my lens, that's how the Afrobeats growth played out to me, because him and a bunch of other people behind the scenes, A&Rs, promoters, DJs, V103 in Atlanta, that pretty much was the pulse for urban radio on the whole East Coast. So if they played a record, everyone else paid attention to the record. So they started playing Afrobeats. And all of a sudden you had a trickle up effect or down effect of different stations playing Afrobeats. So that's my Atlanta perspective and growth on how Afrobeats kind of started making a little headway into this side of
So,
the continent.
so kind of like, some of the cosigns from the, African/American artists, jumping on some of these records, you feel as though was an important part of the success?
It was. I feel like it was an important part of the success. I mean, when you had Alicia Keys going on Instagram and playing WizKid, it's like, wait, what's that record, and who is this artist, and why does this song feel so good, and I can't understand a word this guy is saying?
And that's literally what I was just about to jump into, right? So aside from the actual cosigns, what do we feel, what about the sound, or the artists actually, attract the American, culture? What is it about Afrobeats music that gets us moving out here? If anybody wants to answer that.
I think for me personally, it's just, I think in America, we lost the ability to create music that we can recite and memorize and have melodies to. The same thing that 90s R&B used to do for us. You used to be able to hear artists one take, right, through a verse or through a whole bridge or a hook, and you used to be able to sing along with those artists. And now in today's world, I just feel like Afrobeats is filling that whole void of just our ability to just feel good and connect with the music from an energy perspective, and then also be able to memorize it. We like you said, we don't even know what the hell these guys are saying most of the time, but god dang, it sounds so damn good, and it's just massages the ears in a way. And so I think that's what that's what the music is doing for me.
Is, right? You think just because somebody is, of African descent that they understand what they're saying, but the majority,
word them folks say.
the majority of the music that's hitting the charts nowadays are, from Nigerian artists, but not just Nigerian artists, Yoruba speaking Nigerian artists. So luckily for me, I understand and speak Yoruba, so I understand it, but when you think about that, even the people in the country, let alone the continent, don't understand what they're saying, right? So it has to be something with the music, right? And I think, again, it just gives you that energy. You just want to dance, you just want to feel good, So when you're in spaces, it's like that's all you see people doing, right? You can see anybody from any all backgrounds, all races, we're just there dancing, having a good time, right? And I think that right there is, you can't replace that feeling. And that, like you said, right, we used to have music that gave you that feeling. Nowadays, you don't really get that, right? Which is why I think Afrobeats in general is expanding and, at the fast rate that it is,
But that's what that's also what makes it a little scary, because as Abe was saying, there was a time where you had that music coming on in America. You had that music coming out of the disco trend into that hip hop trend, and it was about feeling good. It was about joy. It was about that unity, and that's what Afrobeats does, right? It fills, like you said, it fills that void. You listen to that, and you just feel good. And they're talking about, well, when it's explained to you, they're talking about love and fun and greatness and stuff,
and bananas.
but that same speed of success can also cultivate those seeds, those weeds, if you will. Where we don't want the same things to happen in Afrobeats that have happened in hip hop, where you've got this, because you have this visibility and those opportunistic groups come in and say, okay, but this is what the rest of the world wants to hear, so put a little bit of this in and put a little of that in, and next thing you know, Afrobeats is all screwed up, right? So we want to be careful of that, and And one of the ways to do that, again, is just if the artist can control their destiny 100% from cradle to grave.
Exactly right, and that comes from obviously companies actually wanting to see the betterment of the community, and not just wanting to make some quick cash off.
Especially a brand new industry.
Right, exactly.
Especially a brand new one.
Exactly, because they can F it up really quickly, But so I kind of wanted to get into collaborations, right? I think just in general nowadays, artist collaborations is important. But when it comes to Afrobeats, right, when do you want to collab, right? And then, Fotemah, you kind of mentioned how obviously A2IM's involvement and kind of other artists kind of giving that cosign and jumping on these records, and that obviously helps. But when, right? I talk to labels all the time, and the first thing they want to do is trying to do a feature with this person or that person, right? For example, we put out Rema Calm Down about a year and some change ago. Record went crazy, right? And then after that, Selena jumped on it, and then it took that record from one place to another, right? So at what level of success do you want to collab with other artists, or do you how do you feel when the artists collab from inception? Do you think that works better, or do you think the record needs to be successful on its own before the collabs happen?
I don't think the record needs to be successful on its own for the collapse to happen. With African music, it's all about the energy. You have artists from here that jump on records that just feel really good. So it all depends. You have Afrobeat records that have been out for like years, or a year or two, and then all of a sudden, not even somebody that you would know, just a DJ takes it and does a different version to it, like the Cinq record, and all of a sudden it just goes crazy, and you can't really say that record had, compared to where the numbers are now, it had a significant amount of numbers for that DJ to hop on it. So no, it doesn't really matter where in the process the artist collaborations happen. But as long as the collaborations make sense, it doesn't really matter where. I've seen it earlier on in the process. I mean, like Black Bones and Luda.
Yeah, that's a record
That's
right there.
early in the process.
Right.
But it's perfect timing because the music is good.
So I think because the music can be good, but for it to reach that certain level of success, the way Essence and Justin Bieber was on it, or like I said, Rema and Selena. Do you think that plays a part in it, or do you think, because we haven't really seen a record straight out of the gate with it's a collaboration record just kind of do its thing. Even like we had Burner and Ed Sheeran, he put that record out together. That record is huge, but it's not as big as you would expect it to be, And I think part of it is it's because, again, I don't think people are comfortable with the fact of getting an Afrobeat kind of collab initially, because for me, I feel as though Afrobeats grows at home first, right? Like you don't have a globally popular Afrobeat song unless it's popular. Again, this is how I feel, right? Within the continent, I think it needs to work itself there before it expands to the market, because again, you have a large African population within, all across the world. So they, people from home need to, understand, love it first, and then it comes over here, and then it becomes, the next thing. But, obviously, I know you guys might have different opinions, so.
I don't necessarily disagree with that statement. I think it starts with the music. It needs to feel good. It needs to, you need to hone in on your core fan base, which is quote unquote home.
Right.
Because if you neglect them, then who's your audience after that?
Right.
But also to your point in regards to collaborations, I think it varies based on the artist.
Right.
Because are we talking about cross-cultural collaborations, or are we talking about a collaboration with like Burna Boy and Black Sherif, for example?
Right,
that would be
right.
beneficial, and it has been beneficial.
Exactly, right.
And that relationship between those two now has helped Black Sherif in his career, because now he's on stages with Burna Boy performing their song together.
Right.
And then there's like the Fireboy and the Ed Sheerans, where Fireboy put out Peru and he stood alone, and that song was great by itself.
Exactly.
But also he wanted to step over and cross over into a different market.
Right.
i.e. the UK, i.e. the US.
Right,
So you
right.
have to kind of be intentional with your collaborations, especially when you're in that space
Right.
of, okay, I've honored my home base, I've honored my core fan base,
Right.
but now it's time for me to tap into a different market. So that's when it's like, okay, maybe I should put Ed Sheeran on this.
Right.
We did a version with Blast and 21 Savage because that's a whole entirely different market.
Right.
So it really just depends on the artist and in the situation. I don't think there's a cookie cutter answer for that.
That's a great answer.
And just to add to that, when we say home, right, when it comes to the continent and Afrobeats, what is really home? Because Afrobeats, in its truest form, is Nigeria is home.
Right.
But Libyanka is from Cameroon.
Right. Right.
You see what I'm saying? So, but she didn't blow up in Cameroon. She kind of just blew up all over the place. There wasn't like a specific, she started here and this happened here, and it didn't happen from Cameroon. And sometimes, truth be told, you're accepted away from home before home gets you. Now, when home embraces you first and you go, it's another level of you're gone.
Right. Right.
But when you have that outside energy, apart from home, because it's like your neighborhood. Let's see what he gonna do. We watch him. I knew him when he was little Pookie. You don't want to give the person, but when little Pookie becomes, it's like, man, that was my guy. I've been there. So it's the same thing.
Right.
It's the same thing for the music, and then even to dive in deeper when you talk about Afrobeats. As an African,
Right.
Saying Afrobeats, not everyone is identifying it as all the music coming out of Africa.
Correct.
And that's like saying Africa is this one country. So I know we're going to dive into that, but
For sure, and that's exactly what I was about to dive into, right? Because, with Afro beats, I think a lot of people under the assumption that I've even had some people play, I asked them what's their favorite Afrobeat song, and they'll play me a Vibes Cartel song. And I'm just like, okay, all right, I see what this is. But again, not for nothing, again, it's just a lack of knowledge of knowing, number one, where Afrobeats originates, but then also, the fact that it's a bunch of subgenres within that genre, right? Because I think we all agree here that we're barely scratching the surface of what this genre is going to be. Right? It's a thing where we're starting to get accepted, as we just saw. I think the Grammys just announced. There's a what's the category? Best African performance or something like that.
Yeah.
But for a fact that is gonna eventually get messy, because what does that mean, right? Is it Afro pop? Is it Afro beat? Is it Amapiano? Is it and even right now, Afro rock isn't really a thing, but we know that's gonna become a thing. You know what I'm saying? So what? With all these genres growing rapidly, how do you kind of differentiate that, when it comes to, the DSPs or, these award shows, how do we see that kind of shaping within the next, 5 years, 10 years, 2 years?
When you say differentiate, what do you mean exactly?
Where we don't classify it as one thing, right? Right now it's Afrobeats, right? The best Afrobeats artist, the best, African song. What does that actually mean? Like, how do we actually get to a point where, where do we see it get into within the next 5 to 10 years?
So are you asking, when do you differentiate the music from the culture?
No, not really. It's like where do we see it get into within the next 5 to 10 years, right?
We were just talking backstage where I was telling you how there was an Croatian producer named Distinct on Beatstars that uploaded an Afrobeat that he made, and a K-pop group, Tomorrow and Together.
Right.
It became a #1 album,
Right.
even in America.
Right.
It's a K-pop group on an Afrobeat song made by a Croatian.
Right.
So I don't know how they're going to categorize this stuff soon. It's going to be difficult, and I think the beats, the music themselves, are going to transcend and fuse into all of popular music. It already has, and I'm afraid that it may get so diluted to a point. You're not going to know where to categorize it in African music, and how you're going to categorize it for the world to make sure that it's known that this is where it came from.
And yeah, and that's kind of what
Like,
I'm asking, right? You know, 'cause
yeah.
like 5 years ago, it was no Afrobeats, it was world music. You get what I'm saying? So where do we see it within the next 5 years? Because personally, I feel as though it's gonna be a breakdown. You're gonna have Amapiano, you're gonna have Afro pop, you're gonna have Afro rock, you're gonna have, you know, even North African. You know, we're gonna start categorizing that. So it's like, where do you guys, you know, personally see it? You know, how fast do you see it happening?
I think it's going to happen pretty quickly. I think the industry has to catch up because we're already there. We just don't have we don't have the setup. As far as DSPs go, like Apple specifically, it's world, it's Afrobeat, it's Afrobeats, it's African, and that's it.
Right.
So if we have someone who's Afro pop, and I would say Fireboy DML skews Afro pop, like that's not even a subgenre.
Right.
So you have to put it in world so it can still fit between both
Right.
Afro beats and quote unquote pop. So I think they're gonna have to adjust and keep up. Similarly to how like Audio Mac just recently, their streams count towards the RIAA certification.
Right.
Similarly to how Billboard created a Afro beats chart. Like they have to play catch up.
Right.
Because we know it's a need, but I think the more we continue to have these conversations and educate people within the industry, then they'll make these resources, these tools available for us on these platforms.
Cool. So
I think it's a great start where we are right now, which is being, you know, I think we're still behind by a lot, but recognizing that, okay, this music is coming from there. So I think even with the Grammys, when they're saying best performance, they took it a step further of listing some of the genres
within that,
under that. So they had Kizomba,
right.
they had Mapoka
Right.
on there. They had, of course, Afrobeats. They have Amapiano, and they had Ndombolo on there, which is one of my favorites. So, you know, I think progress is being made, but you're talking about a continent with 1.4 billion people. Nigeria alone is 230 million.
Right.
And those numbers do not reflect in the data that we're even seeing right now online, because if those numbers were reflecting the data, the music that they were listening to, the monthly listeners of some of those artists would surpass some of the highest. Some might even pass Beyonce. I mean, 230 million in his country.
Right, exactly. So it's kind of funny you mentioned that, and I guess I'll wrap it up real quick so we can have some questions. But you know, it kind of goes back to infrastructure, right? Like Spotify just became available in Nigeria, where all of these, so the monthly listeners don't even reflect the people within that continent. So imagine once the continent gets a hold of proper infrastructure and data, it's out of there.
That's the fight that we're on now with DotHipHop, right? And that's what we were talking about before. And I feel like what Abe was saying, I think that's what I was saying as well, is I just be afraid of how the music would be diluted. And that's why I was asking, well, the question to be more specific, was it that we were talking about the music versus the pots, the culture, right? Because that's exactly what's happening in hip hop, and being that they're, you know, somewhat, parallel.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, any questions in the room? If you have a mic, you know, if anybody has any questions for any of our amazing panelists here. No questions?
See this team, no questions.
Walking around with the mic. Has the mics.
Hello?
Huh.
No, not working.
1 second.
Hello?
How you
Can
doing?
you hear me? Yeah? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Hello, I work for Idol Digital Distribution. I'm from Paris. I have a question regarding how you market this kind of music in the US. Are there any specifics that are different to other genres? Or you mentioned the socials. What about radio?
How do you market Afrobeat records?
Yes.
Anybody wants to go?
So for me personally, because this is what I do on a day-to-day, I think there is no cookie cutter answer for this either, because it really depends on the artists themselves and where they are in their specific market. Because some people, they've conquered their market, whether it be Ghana or whether it be Lagos, Nigeria, they've conquered that. So they're in a space where it's time for them to cross over. So again, it starts with the music. You can't stray away from the infectious melodies and rhythms. You can't stray away from the percussions. That's going to be the basis and the foundation of the music always for it to be successful. But also keeping the heart of that and making sure we can educate people who are in the US in this market, who aren't familiar, putting it in spaces, putting it in rooms, getting US influencers. For radio, we want to be cautious with radio because radio is extremely expensive. So you have to be intentional when you want to go to radio with a record. Like for instance, I'll always use Peru as an example because it's a great example. We didn't put Peru with Just Fireboy at radio. We put Peru with Ed Sheeran because we knew it would go like wildfire. In the UK, in the States, in Germany, Netherlands, France, etc., because that was an intentional doing to help him cross over. For like a Wande Cole or an Olamide, we don't see a lot of press about Olamide, but Olamide is actually a big figure in Lagos, Nigeria in regards to Afrobeats music. He's one of the pillars. But no one would really know that because he doesn't do too much press. So it really depends on the artist and how you can still work within their means and what they're comfortable with, but still making sure that you hit those key pillars and hit these key markets, whether it be the US, whether it be the UK, but just all the markets outside of their home territory.
And to kind of add to that, for us specifically, I'm no marketing expert, right? But just kind of knowing and being of Nigeria, being, from the continent, whenever we're rolling out an artist, again, and this is something I know, I just kind of believe personally, you want to make sure you market the record properly within the diaspora, right? So like radio in America is super expensive, but radio in Nigeria is not. So if you get it spinning, you could get a radio campaign for like 10K, 10K US. It's going, it's in all the clubs, DJ runs, it's so many different things you can do. We have people on ground running them around. And again, and that's why I kind of stick to that point that if you could get something going within your country or the continent, I think it's easier to kind of, then you could come up with plans within the States and how we're going to attack the States, right? Because radio in the States is honestly not worth it until it reaches that point, So yeah, I don't want to talk too much. Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Carter Van Pelt. I'm the catalog director at VP Records, which maybe you guys know, Sean Paul, Beanie Man, the entire history of reggae and dancehall. Okay, good. Respect. Yeah. No, but you kind of rolled your eyes at the Vibes Cartel comparison. And Abe, when you were talking earlier, I didn't hear you mention reggae or dancehall, but I wanted to know your perception of like the relationship between reggae and dancehall and the origin of Afrobeats, where it's at now, and do you guys think that reggae and dancehall are a cautionary tale in terms of where those genres have gone and what's happened with them and what could happen to Afrobeats?
100%. I mean, I could talk about that for days,
We should talk.
We could definitely talk after, but, I think, the comparison was just the issue just because, again, when we talk about just talking about the subgenres within that, it's just, you can't, although there's a bunch of similarities, they're obviously are different genres, right? But then you also have, artists like Ruger, who uses a bunch of, Caribbean, whether it's, what's the word for it? Blanking on the word, but a lot of Caribbean influence within his music, right? So it's definitely a bunch of similarities. I feel as though, let me let somebody else answer because I'll talk about this for days.
I want to answer that one. For me, it's real simple, right? You have 230 million people in Nigeria alone. Ethiopia next with, I think, 120-something, and Egypt after that. They've been waiting a long time to get this shot.
That's true.
And they're not about to let this go anytime soon. So we're not only talking about the population, but we're also talking about the amount of creatives that are waiting to just evolve this genre, over and over. So when you look at Jamaica and dancehall, I think the amount of creatives that's there compared to the amount of creatives that's not only in Nigeria, but the whole continent as a whole. And this is a continent with the largest youth population in the world, with 60% of that being below 25. So, of course, there's power in the youth, and I don't think the same thing is gonna happen. And to me, dance hall never went anywhere, truth be told. You know,
That I'll argue with you all day on that, but go ahead.
you know, at least for me, right? As an old head that listens to it, it never went anywhere. But Afrobeats is just getting started, like we said. Everything right now is under Afrobeats.
Right.
So some of these genres are starting to poke through, like Amapiano. And then from Amapiano, now you start having Asheke, who's pretty much Afro piano. Right. So it's gonna keep evolving, just like I think hip hop evolved over and over and over.
But I think also the technology is available today that wasn't available in the exploration and involvement of dancehall.
That's true.
Right.
That's
And
true.
that's a primary difference.
Beatstars wasn't around during the first evolution. No, for real.
Video
I mean,
wasn't around. People couldn't
Video,
distribute.
social media, none of that was around. And
Yeah.
even if you, right now, as we were discussing infrastructure, having like if we say, okay, Afrobeat, so if dancehall was now in dancehall having a DotHipHop or those artists actually owning their IP, pushing people to their own locations
I
and
think the
being able to
difference,
do
though,
that.
I think the difference too, like he was saying about the youth, like Nigeria went from number 100 in ranking on website traffic on Beatstars to number 3 in just like 4 or 5 years.
Right.
It's number 3. So when you talk about the youth and their independent mindset that they're having in Nigeria, I feel like traditionally in VP Records and the industry that you're coming from, you've always had to work with a label to get going, always had to work with a studio to get your sound right. Today, these kids in Nigeria don't wait for nobody.
Right.
Like they're making music
They
and
don't
they're,
have to.
you know, they're
So-
go ahead. I know
Yeah.
we're over. I know we're over. Yeah.
So, over time, I wanted to, obviously thank you guys for,
Yeah.
showing up, and I wanted to thank our wonderful panelists here for, speaking from experience and, blessing the room with some knowledge. So, I mean, we're good.
Thank you, guys.
We'll step outside there.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to
Appreciate
chat
it.
with us.
Thank you.
But thank you again for your time.
Sorry.